Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
It is good to be back. And today we're opening up a text that I think suffers from a massive branding problem.
A branding problem? How so?
Well, most people, they hear the title, The Count of Monte Cristo, and they immediately think adventure, swashbuckling, guys in puffy shirts having sword fights.
Right, a classic adventure yarn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what we're going to argue today, looking at Alexandre Dumas' masterpiece, is that this is not an adventure story. Not really.
I have to agree. I mean, when I first picked this up, and I'll admit, like probably most people listening, I read the abridged version in high school. I thought it was just a straightforward revenge thriller. You know, guy gets wrong, guy gets rich, guy gets even. Simple. But reading the full unabridged text for this deep dive,
Right.
it felt completely different.
How so?
It felt less like a story and more like I was reading a manual. A manual on how to dismantle a society from the inside out.
That is precisely the lens we need. This isn't just about personal vengeance. I mean, that's part of it, of course. But it's really an analysis of revenge as an alternative governance structure.
An alternative government, wow.
We're looking at a central question that feels incredibly modern, almost ripped from today's headlines. How do injustice, institutional power, and this idea of delayed retribution, how do they completely reshape a person's identity and morality?
And what happens when the systems we're supposed to trust just fail?
Exactly. What happens when the courts, the banks, the government decide to prioritize their own survival over the truth? That's when faith in the whole system collapses.
It's terrifying because we all kind of operate on this belief in procedural justice. You know, if I follow the rules, if I'm a good citizen, the system will protect me.
Right.
But this book kicks off with the ultimate nightmare premise. What if the system decides you're a liability? What if the machine eats you just to save itself?
That's the core of it.
Yeah.
And so the thesis we're exploring today is that The Count of Monte Cristo is, for all intents and purposes, a textbook.
A textbook on what?
It's a textbook that demonstrates how power, secrecy, knowledge, and above all, patience allow a single individual to operate completely outside and eventually high above the formal systems of justice.
Okay, so to get into that, we need to understand the world this was written in, the context.
We have to understand the soil this story grew out of. And that means we have to start with the author, Alexandre Dumas.
Because he was a system unto himself, right? You mentioned the book's branding problem, but Dumas was like the first person to turn literature into a mass market industry.
He was a titan, an absolute force of nature, born in 1802, and his personal background is so vital to understanding this book. He was the son of a general in the French Revolutionary armies.
A celebrated general.
For a time, yes. His father, Thomas Alexandre Dumas, was this incredible figure. But, and this is key, he was the illegitimate son of a French marquis and an enslaved African woman, Marie Cosette Dumas, from Saint-Domingue, which is now Haiti.
Wow. So in early 19th century France, Dumas is navigating this peak of high society while being of mixed race descent. And he's the son of a revolutionary hero who died poor.
Exactly. It's an incredibly complex position. It gave him this unique and probably quite painful perspective on just how fragile status and reputation really are.
He saw it firsthand with his own father.
He saw how quickly his father, a genuine hero, was basically erased from the history books by Napoleon, partly because of his race and partly because of his staunch Republican politics. So Dumas grew up hungry. He didn't have the classical elite education of his contemporaries like Flaubert or Hugo. He was largely self-taught.
And that hunger translated into how he approached his work.
Oh, absolutely. When he started writing, he didn't treat it as some sacred, solitary art form. He treated it like a business, a startup.
The famous novel factory.
Yes. And the critics of his day, they derided it. They called him a sellout. But it was sheer genius. Between 1841 and 1850, so in one decade, his factory produced 41 novels.
That's physically impossible for one person to write.
It is. So he basically invented the modern writer's room. He had collaborators, the most famous being Auguste Maquet, who would do a lot of the groundwork. They'd outline the plots, do the deep historical research, draft entire scenes.
And then Dumas would come in.
Then Dumas, like a modern-day showrunner, would sweep in and inject the magic. The wit, the incredible pacing, the unforgettable character voices. He was the soul of the machine.
It's like he was the algorithm and the master editor rolled into one. And this is so important because of how the story was consumed, isn't it? This wasn't a book you'd just buy and read in a weekend.
Not at all. It was a feuilleton, a serial. It ran in the newspaper, the Journal des Débats, from 1844 to 1846.
So it's like a TV show today.
It's like a Netflix show that drops One, say, 50-minute episode every single day for 2 straight years.
That completely changes the structure of the story you're telling. You have to keep people hooked. You need cliffhangers at the end of every installment.
You need a constant feedback loop with your audience. It created what you could call a suspense economy. The narrative system had to mirror the market system it was part of.
And that instability in the story is mirrored by the historical setting, too.
Perfectly. I mean, we are in 19th century France, a country that was basically having an identity crisis every 5 years. You had the Revolution, Napoleon takes over, then the Bourbon Restoration brings the monarchy back, then Napoleon escapes and comes back for the 100 Days.
And then the Second Restoration, it's dizzying.
It's a game of political musical chairs, but the chairs are labeled traitor and patriot.
And if you're sitting in the wrong one when the music stops,
you lose your property, your freedom, or your head. In a system that's unstable, the idea of legitimacy is incredibly fragile. What is legal on Monday is high treason on Tuesday. The characters in this book are all just trying to surf these chaotic waves.
And there's one guy who doesn't know how to surf.
Our protagonist, Edmond Dantès.
Who is, at the beginning, the ultimate meritocratic success story. He's 19 years old, he's the best sailor on his ship, he's about to be promoted to captain, and he's engaged to the most beautiful girl in town. He's a true believer.
He believes the world is fair. He believes that if you are good at your job and you treat people well, you will be rewarded.
That's his fatal flaw, isn't it?
It is. He completely lacks what we're calling systems awareness. He only sees people. He doesn't see the structures moving them around.
So let's dive into that. The failure of formal justice, it all starts with the input into this disaster. It starts with a letter.
A denunciation. This is a weaponized piece of paper. It's written by a man named Danglars, who is the purser on Edmond's ship. He's jealous that this 19-year-old is about to become his boss.
And to hide his crime, he writes it with his left hand to disguise the handwriting.
A petty, cowardly act. He gets the idea, but he's too afraid to act alone. So he ropes in Fernand Mondego, a fisherman who is desperately in love with Edmond's fiancée, Mercedes.
So we have professional envy and sexual jealousy as the motivators.
And then there's a third man, their neighbor Caderousse. He's there, he sees it happening, and he's just too drunk and too cowardly to intervene. He represents complicit silence.
So you have this unholy trinity: envy, lust, and cowardice. But what's so brilliant about it is that these are all deeply personal grievances. They hate Edmond for reasons that have nothing to do with the state.
But the weapon they choose to use against him is political.
That's the hack.
That is the hack. They know the system, the restored monarchy, is deeply paranoid about Bonapartist supporters of the exiled Napoleon. So the letter they write falsely accuses Edmond of being a secret agent for Napoleon, carrying treasonous letters from his exile on Elba.
They convert their personal malice into a matter of state security.
And the system, being paranoid and inefficient, swallows the bait instantly. Hook, line, and sinker.
Edmond is arrested at his own betrothal feast. In front of his family, his fiancée, he's dragged before the deputy crown prosecutor, a man named Gerard de Villefort.
And I think we need to spend some real time on Villefort. Because in a simpler story, he'd just be a one-dimensional villain. But in this book, he's something much more terrifying. What's that? He's a bureaucrat, a functionary. He is the system.
He's the processor. He's the man at the interface between the citizen and the vast, impersonal machinery of the law.
And here's the crazy part. Initially, the system works. Villefort interrogates Edmond. And he's smart. He quickly sees that this kid is naive, politically clueless.
Edmond is completely honest. He admits he's carrying a letter from Napoleon, but he swears he has no idea what's in it. He was just doing a favor for his dying captain. It was a deathbed request.
And Villefort believes him. He sees the truth. He's about to let him go. He's actually, mentally burning the file. He's thinking, this is a waste of my time. The boy is innocent. And then the glitch happens. The fatal error in the code.
The one question that changes everything.
Villefort asks, just as a formality, who is this letter addressed to in Paris?
And Edmond, being honest, tells him the name. Monsieur Noirtier.
And in that moment, the temperature in the room drops 50 degrees. The whole world shifts on its axis.
Because Noirtier is Villefort's father.
Yes.
Now that is a conflict of interest.
It's much worse than that. It's an existential threat. You have to understand Villefort's position. He's an ambitious young prosecutor, a staunch royalist, and his entire career is built on his reputation for hunting down Bonapartists.
And his own father is one of the chief Bonapartist conspirators in Paris.
If it ever becomes public knowledge that a letter from the exiled Emperor Napoleon was addressed to his father, Villefort isn't just fired, he's finished. His family is disgraced. He could even be tried for treason himself, just by association.
So this is the moment. This is the choice point where the system has to decide what it's for. Is it for justice or is it for its own stability?
And Villefort, being the system, makes the system's choice. He takes the letter from Edmond and he throws it into the fireplace.
He destroys the physical evidence.
But, and this is the absolute key to the whole book, he realizes that memory is also a form of evidence. Edmond Dantès has seen the name on the envelope. Edmond Dantès knows the connection.
Edmond is the data leak.
He is the loose end. And Villefort can't have that. So he doesn't send Edmond to prison because he thinks Edmond is guilty of a crime. He sends him to prison to quarantine the information.
He sacrifices an innocent citizen to preserve the structural integrity of his own career.
And the honor of his family name. It's the ultimate bureaucratic cover-up. He writes an order to be imprisoned in the Chateau d'If and adds a secret note that this man is a dangerous political radical who must be kept in the strictest solitary confinement.
And with the stroke of a pen, Edmond Dantès is deleted from the world.
He enters the black box. And the Chateau d'If isn't just a prison, it's a system of social erasure. The man named Edmond Dantès ceases to exist. He becomes a number.
Number 34.
And he's thrown into the dungeon, a place reserved for the politically dangerous, and left to rot.
There's a scene in there that I found so heartbreaking, and it perfectly highlights the failure of not just one man, but the entire institutional structure. The prison inspector visits.
Ah, yes. The oversight committee.
This is supposed to be the check, right? The balance, the fail-safe in the system to prevent this exact kind of abuse.
The inspector represents the idea of the benevolent state, the state that cares. He goes from cell to cell, asking the prisoners if they have any complaints, if they have a petition for the king.
And what happens?
Every single prisoner he talks to screams the same thing. I'm innocent. I was framed. I demand a fair trial.
And the inspector just rolls his eyes.
To him, it's just white noise. He literally tells the governor, it's always the same old song. He's heard it so many times it has lost all meaning.
So the very mechanism designed for feedback is broken.
It's broken because the signal-to-noise ratio is too low. When everyone claims to be innocent, the concept of actual innocence becomes invisible. And because Villefort put that secret flag in Edmond's file, the inspector just glances at it, assumes Dantès is some kind of violent anarchist, and moves on without even talking to him.
The fail-safe fails. So Edmond rots for 14 years.
14 years. An entire lifetime. And in that darkness, in that solitude, the naive young sailor dies, a slow, agonizing death. But the man who eventually comes out, he's something else entirely.
And he doesn't do it alone. He has a catalyst. He meets the Abbé Faria.
The Faria node.
Okay,
This might be my favorite part of the entire system map. In narrative terms, this is the classic mentor archetype, the wise old man.
The Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Exactly. But in systems terms, Faria is the developer. He finds the raw hardware of Edmond Dantès, strong, resilient, but with no software, and he installs a completely new operating system.
And he finds him by accident, right? Faria is the mad priest in the cell next door. He's been digging a tunnel for years.
Miscalculates the geometry of the prison.
And pops up in Edmond's cell instead of outside the walls. And instead of just saying, oops, my bad, he decides to bequeath his entire life's knowledge to this desperate young man.
And you have to consider the curriculum. I mean, this is a full-blown university education happening in a dark, damp cell. Right. Faria doesn't just teach him to read and write better.
No, he teaches him multiple languages. Advanced mathematics, physics, history, political science, philosophy. He essentially downloads the entire intellectual output of the European Enlightenment directly into Edmond's brain.
And think about how he does it. They have nothing. No books, no paper, no pens.
That's the part that's so incredible. It shows you the power of ingenuity.
Faria's first lesson to Edmond is that resources are a matter of perception. You don't have a pen. Fine. You can make one from the cartilage of the fish you get for dinner. You don't have ink. You can make it from a mixture of the soot from your lamp and your own blood. You don't have paper. Use your shirt.
He demonstrates in the most literal way possible that you can create something from nothing if you have the knowledge and the will.
But the most important lesson he teaches isn't the math or the languages. It's the critical thinking, the analysis. There's that amazing scene where they finally sit down to figure out who framed Edmond.
Right, because for years, Edmond has just been consumed by this blind rage. He doesn't know who did it. He just knows he was wronged.
He's still stuck in the emotional stage. He's crying. Why did this happen to me? It's so unfair. And Faria forces him to detach from that. He says, Stop thinking like a victim. Start thinking like an investigator.
He applies the principle of cui bono.
Who benefits? A simple, devastatingly effective question. And he walks Edmond through it step by step. Who had a reason to want you gone?
He becomes a forensic accountant of the soul.
That's a perfect way to put it. He says, let's analyze the data. Who benefited from your arrest? Well, Danglars got the promotion to captain that should have been yours. Fernand was then free to marry Mercedes, which he did. And Villefort's career took off because he uncovered a dangerous Bonapartist plot.
Feria maps out the hooked atoms of the conspiracy. He shows Edmond the underlying structure of his own ruin.
And for the first time, Edmond sees the system. He stops seeing his suffering as just random, tragic bad luck and starts seeing it as the predictable mechanical output of specific actors operating on specific incentives.
And that is the exact moment the systemic operator is born. The moment he realizes he was a pawn and decides, no, from now on, I will be a player.
And then, as if all that knowledge wasn't enough, Feria gives him the capital he needs to actually play the game, the spotted treasure.
The legendary treasure hidden on the deserted island of Monte Cristo. Now, we need to put this money into context. The book values it at around 13 million francs. In 1844, what does that actually mean? Is he just like a rich guy?
No. He is not a rich guy. He is sovereign wealth fund rich. He is small nation-state rich.
Give us some scale.
Okay, so a comfortable upper-middle-class income in Paris at that time might have been, say, 20 or 30,000 francs a year. Edmond has 13 million. In liquid assets, it's an amount of money that is almost abstract in its power.
It's FU money, but on a geopolitical scale.
That's exactly what it is. It's the fuel required to build his alternative governance structure. You know the saying, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools.
Sure.
Well, with this kind of money, you can buy the land the master's house sits on, change the zoning laws, and have it condemned. Wealth, for the Count, is never about luxury. It's the research and development budget for his revenge machine.
Feria, tragically, dies in prison just before their escape plan can be completed. But he gives Edmond the means to get out.
And the escape itself is so heavy with symbolism, I almost missed it the first time I read it. He takes Feria's place in the burial shroud.
It is a literal death and rebirth. The guards, thinking it's the corpse of the old priest, carry the sack out, swing it around, and throw it into the sea from the top of the chateau.
Edmond has to cut himself free from the shroud deep underwater with a piece of sharpened rock and swim to the surface. Edmond Dantès, the innocent, naive victim, drowned in that sack. The entity that surfaces from the waves is the Avenger.
There's that incredible detail where the prison fires the warning cannon to signal an escape. A nearby smuggler's ship hears it, and one of the sailors says something like, "They only fire the cannon for kings and for prisoners."
A beautiful line. It equates the two. Both exist outside the normal social contract, operating under their own rules.
So he finds the treasure. He spends the next decade traveling, mostly in the East. He's educating himself further, learning about toxicology from Ottoman chemists, learning assassin techniques, and most importantly, learning how to leverage his vast capital. And then he arrives in Paris.
And this is key. He doesn't just walk in and start shooting people. That would be efficient, but it wouldn't be justice, not in his mind. He needs to infiltrate the system that destroyed him.
So he uses masks, personas.
Many of them. He's Sinbad the sailor, the eccentric merchant. He's the Abbé Busoni, a traveling Italian priest who hears deathbed confessions. He's Lord Wilmore, a cranky English aristocrat who performs random acts of charity. And of course, the main persona, the Count of Monte Cristo.
Why all the masks? Why not just show up and say, "I'm Edmond Dantès and I'm back"?
Because Edmond Dantès is a corrupted file. He's a non-person. If he returns as Edmond, he's just an escaped convict. He has no rights, no standing. He'd be arrested on sight.
But the Count.
The Count is different. The Count is an exotic, mysterious, unbelievably wealthy nobleman from some forgotten corner of the world. The masks provide him with legitimacy. He hacks the Parisian social hierarchy by playing on their obsession with novelty, mystery, and above all, money.
He uses wealth as a kind of narrative camouflage.
That's a great term for it. And we see this in that incredible scene with Danglars, who is now a baron and one of the most powerful bankers in Paris. Yeah. This is just a masterclass in psychological dominance.
It really is. Danglars is arrogant, self-important. He says, my bank is connected to the Rothschilds. We can handle any request, no matter how large. And the Count, very calmly, asks for unlimited credit.
Which is an insane request. Danglars literally laughs in his face. He says, No one asks for unlimited credit, but define unlimited. And the counter, without blinking, pulls out his wallet and says something like, "Oh, I usually carry about 1,000,000 francs in cash with me, just for daily expenses."
He completely short-circuits Danglars' brain.
He does more than that. He creates a whole new categorization of wealth right in front of him. He tells Danglars, "You, Baron, have a third-class fortune. It's fragile. It depends on investors, on markets, on luck. I have a first-class fortune. It is liquid, it is absolute, it is mine."
He's basically signaling that he operates above the entire economic system that Danglars worships.
And that terrifies Danglars, because Danglars' whole identity is built on being the master of that system. The Count shows him a god that he can't possibly comprehend.
So he establishes himself. He's the talk of the town. He's in the salons. He's at the opera. He deliberately befriends the children of his enemies, becoming a mentor figure to them. And then he begins the system's dismantling phase.
And notice, he targets his three main betrayers. Danglars, the embodiment of the financial system. Fernand, now the Count of Morcerf, a pillar of the military and social system. And Villefort, the ultimate representative of the legal system.
And he attacks each of them through the specific system that gives them their power. He doesn't just shoot them. He effectively cancels them, to use a modern term.
He deconstructs them brick by brick.
So let's break down the hacks.
Yep.
Target 1, the financial system, Danglars.
Danglars' power comes from money. His vulnerability, therefore, is greed and his reliance on information. The Count knows that Danglars makes his fortune by gambling on the stock market based on getting early political news.
So the Count decides to hack the internet of the 19th century, the Chappé telegraph.
Okay, we really need to explain this because it's so
It's over.
ingenious. This isn't an electrical telegraph with Morse code and wires. That's still a few years away.
This is the optical telegraph.
Yes. It's a series of towers built on hilltops all across France, maybe 10 or 15 miles apart. Each tower has a set of giant wooden arms on top, a semaphore. An operator in one tower looks through a telescope at the previous tower in the chain, sees the shape the arms are making, and then replicates that shape on his own tower for the next guy down the line to see.
And in this way, a message could get from, say, the Spanish border to Paris in just a few hours, whereas a messenger on a horse would take days.
It was the high-frequency trading of its day. If you had a friend at the ministry who could tell you what the telegraph said before it became public knowledge, you could make a killing on the stock market.
And Danglars has exactly that kind of inside connection.
He does. So the Count finds a weak link in the chain, a remote tower with a poor, underpaid operator. He bribes him. He pays man an enormous sum to insert one single false signal into the data stream as it passes through his tower.
And the false signal says what?
It says, "Revolution in Spain. King Don Carlos has escaped his exile and returned to Barcelona."
Which, to a banker like Danglars, means that Spanish government bonds are about to be worthless.
Exactly. Danglars gets the tip-off. He panics. He liquidates his entire position, selling millions of francs worth of Spanish bonds for pennies on the dollar to anyone who will take them. The whole market panics with him. Then the next day, the corrected real news arrives. False alarm, no revolution.
The bonds skyrocket back up in value.
But Danglars has already sold at the bottom. He loses something like 700,000 francs in a single afternoon. And the Count, through one of his agents, was the one buying them all up.
It's just brutal. He didn't steal Danglars' money in a conventional sense.
No. He weaponized the latency of information. He found a vulnerability and introduced a piece of corrupted data into the system, knowing that Danglars' own greed would do the rest of the work for him.
Okay, target 2, the social and military system. Fernand, now the Count de Morcerf, a celebrated war hero, a peer of France. His currency isn't money, it's honor.
But his entire reputation, his honor, is built on a lie. He made his name and his fortune during the Greek War of Independence by betraying his benefactor, the Ali Pasha of Janina. He was supposed to be defending a fortress for him. Instead, he surrendered it to the Turks.
And sold the Pasha's wife and young daughter into slavery.
And the Count, who has been playing the longest of long games, has spent years tracking down that daughter, a woman named Haiti. He bought her freedom and has raised her as his own ward.
So he brings the primary witness to the crime to Paris with him. He brings the receipt.
Literally. He doesn't make the accusation against Morcerf himself. That would be too direct. He arranges for the story to be published in an opposition newspaper, which forces a formal inquiry in the Chamber of Peers, the French equivalent of the House of Lords.
And at the climax of this hearing, when Morcerf is denying everything, the Count arranges for Haiti to walk into the chamber.
She walks in her full Greek attire and simply says, I am the daughter of Ali Pasha, and that man over there is the one who betrayed my father and sold me to a slave trader.
It's basically a 19th century doxing.
It is total reputation destruction. Morcerf's power was entirely constructed from the narrative of his honor. When the truth comes out, his social capital evaporates in an instant. The other peers shun him. His own son, Albert, is horrified and abandons him. His wife, Mercedes, the woman he stole from Edmond, leaves him.
He is socially dead before he even gets home.
He goes home to his empty mansion and shoots himself. The Count weaponized transparency. He didn't have to tell a single lie. He just had to reveal the truth that Morcerf had spent 20 years burying.
And that brings us to target 3, the darkest one, Villefort, the legal and moral system.
Villefort represents the moral order. His house is strict, puritanical, built on the rigid foundation of the law. But the Count knows there are secrets, crimes, rotting under the floorboards of that perfect house. And he identifies the key vulnerability.
Not Villefort himself, but his second wife, Madame de Villefort.
Yes, she is ambitious, ruthless, and she desperately wants her young son, Edward, to inherit the family's entire fortune. The only obstacle is Valentine, Villefort's daughter from his first marriage, who stands to inherit most of it.
So the Count plays the role of the serpent in the Garden of Eden.
He has this incredibly chilling, quiet conversation with Madame de Villefort. He never says, "You should kill your stepdaughter." He's far too clever for that. He just talks to her about his travels in the East. He talks to her about chemistry.
He tells her about aqua tofana, the legendary untraceable poison of the Medicis and the Borgias.
He explains the science of toxicology to her. He explains how, if you use tiny repeated doses, you can build up an immunity in yourself, a process called mithridatism. But if you use it on someone else, it produces symptoms that look exactly like a natural illness, a stroke, a heart failure.
He's not handing her a gun. He's handing her the knowledge of how to build one.
He introduces the virus of an idea into a system he knows is already corrupt. He knows she's greedy and has no conscience. He gives her the technical capability to act on her darkest desires. And then he just steps back and watches.
And she starts poisoning people, not just Valentine, but other relatives who are in the line of succession.
And the horror for Villefort, the great prosecutor, the man who sends people to the guillotine for their crimes, is the slow dawning realization that the serial killer he's hunting is sleeping in his own bed.
The system turns on itself. The machinery of justice that he commands is completely useless inside the walls of his own home.
He tries to prosecute his own wife.
Mm-hmm.
The whole house of cards collapses into madness and death.
But this is where the Count's perfect machine starts to spin out of control. And we have to talk about the moral ambiguity and the collateral damage. Because up to this point, the Count feels... well, he feels like Batman. He's cool, he's methodical, he's righteous.
He feels like an agent of Providence.
Right, but then innocent people start to get hurt. The bodies of people who weren't on his list start piling up.
The absolute turning point of the novel, the moment the reader's sympathy has to shift, is the death of Edward. Edward is Villefort's young son. He's maybe 9 years old. And he is completely innocent.
The Count never planned for him to die.
No. But when Villefort finally confronts his wife with her crimes, he tells her to commit suicide to save the family honor from a public trial. Again, you see, saving the system over the person she agrees. But she takes the poison and gives it to her beloved son as well.
And there's that agonizing scene where the Count, hearing what's happened, rushes in. He has this special elixir, a powerful restorative he uses. He pours it down the boy's throat, trying to save him.
But it's too late. The boy is dead. The Count just freezes. For the first time in 20 years, his mask of cold detachment shatters. He looks at the body of that dead child and he says, "My God, have I done too much?"
He realizes his equation was flawed. He thought he was an instrument of God. But a dead child isn't divine justice. It's just a dead child.
Systems cannot be destroyed without debris. You can't unleash a hurricane and expect it to only knock down the houses of the wicked.
The Count realizes that by setting these systemic failures in motion, by introducing the poison into Villefort's house, he has become a monster himself. He has lost his own humanity in the process of avenging it.
This connects all the way back to the start, the crisis in perception. To destroy his enemies, the Count had to stop seeing them as people. He had to perceive them as components in a system, as hooked atoms. But in doing so, he dehumanized himself.
There's an earlier scene that foreshadows this, isn't there? The public execution in Rome, the Mazzolata?
Yes, where he forces the young, idealistic sons of his enemies to watch a man get brutally bludgeoned to death with a giant mallet. And the Count watches it like he's watching a weather report. He is utterly cold. He tells the horrified young men that human justice is a joke, An eye for an eye is his only law.
But by the end of the book, standing over the body of a dead child, he finally realizes the truth in that old saying, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind.
His certainty is gone.
So let's bring this into the present day. I mean, why does this book, written in 1844 about events in 1815, still hit so hard in the 2020s?
Because the core anxiety that powers it has not changed one bit. We are still living in a world defined by a crisis in perception when it comes to our institutions.
How do you mean?
Well, you look at our financial systems, and you see danglars everywhere. People gambling with public money, privatizing their massive gains, and socializing their catastrophic losses.
Yeah.
You look at the legal system, and you see vil-force prosecutors who seem more concerned with their conviction rates and political careers than with actual truth and justice.
And because of that distrust, we have the vigilante fantasy.
It is the dominant myth of our time. Just look at our pop culture. John Wick, Batman, The Equalizer, Reacher. We are completely obsessed with this fantasy of a single hyper-competent individual who has the resources and the moral certainty to step outside the broken official system and deliver real justice. The Count of Monte Cristo is the blueprint. He's the grandfather of Batman.
He's Batman, but with no kill rule and a much better wine cellar.
And he also, in a strange way, foreshadows things like cancel culture or call-out culture. The Count doesn't challenge Morcerf to a duel with swords. He destroys him with information. He leaks the documents. He exposes the hypocrisy.
He weaponizes transparency.
In an age of WikiLeaks and social media doxing and public reckonings, the Count's methods feel incredibly uncomfortably familiar.
But the warning of the book is also just as relevant. The warning that if you go down that road, if you appoint yourself as the sole arbiter of justice, you might end up causing unimaginable collateral damage.
Yes. The fantasy of the vigilante is deeply satisfying on a narrative level, but the reality is messy and tragic. The book doesn't conclude with a triumphant fist pump. It ends with a very somber, quiet reflection.
The Count sails away into the horizon. He gives away most of his immense fortune. He realizes that kind of godlike power is too heavy for any single human to hold.
He leaves a final letter for the young lovers he managed to save from the wreckage, Maximilian and Valentine. And in it, he writes the famous last line of the novel.
All human wisdom is contained in these two words, wait and hope.
Attendre et séparer. It's a complete pivot away from his previous philosophy of control and destroy. He's admitting that humans cannot perfectly control the complex systems we live in. We have to endure them, and we have to hold on to hope for something better. It's an incredibly humble ending to an incredibly arrogant journey.
So to connect this all back to the Crisis and Perception Project as a whole, what is the one big takeaway for our listeners from this deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is that systems hide their rot. Danglars' bank looked solid and respectable right until the day it wasn't. Villefort's reputation as a pillar of justice looked pristine until the day it shattered. Power, especially corrupt power, hides best behind the mask of legitimacy.
And when those legitimate institutions fail us?
When we find ourselves stuck in our own personal chateau d'if, the book warns us to be incredibly careful that our response doesn't end up replicating the very evil we're trying to fight.
Justice becomes a personal crusade when institutions are inaccessible. But personal crusades rarely have surgical precision.
Precisely. The account wins his war, but Edmond Dantès, the happy young man he once was, never really comes back. The price of that deep dive into the abyss of revenge is that you might just drown in it.
On that rather sobering note, I think we'll wrap it up. This book is an absolute monster, over 1,000 pages in most editions, but I have to say it is worth every single minute.
Absolutely. And my one piece of advice is,
Yeah.
do not watch the movies. They almost always simplify it and ruin the ending. Read the text. We highly recommend the Penguin Classics translation by Robin Buss. He restores a lot of the grit, the sex, and the drug use that the original Victorian translators censored out.
And credit where it's due to the amazing novel factory of Alexandre Dumas for building a machine that still runs perfectly almost 200 years later.
Indeed. A masterpiece.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis and Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.